Hey, son, already got my money's worth from the F1 TV premium. That was a good start of the season. We had all those expectations for the rookies, bigger expectations for Lewis, then chaos. Imagine Isaac Hadjar out. His F1 debut. He's out. I mean, that's one of those where it's like you feel for him, but also you're like, do you come back from that? I don't know. That's like just a little chip shot to win the Masters, and you miss it. That's to start out your career. Doing out, signs going out in a friggin' safety car. I mean, that was just madness. Sauber, we've been talking about Nico Hulkenberg for 2 years now. He gets in that Sauber, he's already got more points than all they got last year. It's just crazy. All right, you ready to go, son?
I am ready to go.
Welcome to Hard Compound, an American take on Formula One and the smartest discussion on the sport. Race 1 in the books. Melbourne, Australia, my favorite city on the other side of the world. What a good start to the F1 season. A season I think will be the most competitive in at least a decade. All right, son, what are your big takeaways from the Australian Grand Prix?
I got one takeaway, and that is racers don't cry.
Ouch.
Yeah. Maybe you don't come back from that, but what you can do is control how you respond. And it was a disappointing response from some of these guys. And, it's tough. I can't drive an F1 car. I can't drive in those conditions. That's probably going to be the trickiest racing conditions of any race this season for any of these guys. So it was tough. I mean, we saw the cream rise to the top, right? I mean, it was pretty evident who's the best out there currently, who has the most confidence, and that was our podium.
Yeah. Oh, that was tough. I mean, one of the fastest tracks, one of the fastest races on the calendar, rain, all those rookies, tough.
Yeah, I mean, it was fun. I had a good time. It was a late race start here and kind of annoying that everybody kept crashing because it just made it go longer and longer and longer.
Right.
But most of those incidents, those crashes, really weren't particularly the driver's fault. I mean, at some point, your car just goes off. And it seemed like there were about 5 drivers, I guess, that sort of happened to, and they ended up in a wall. And unfortunately, it didn't seem like there was much that they could do about it. It didn't seem like they were over aggressive or doing anything particularly wrong. The fact of the matter is, though, there were 12, 13 drivers that kept it all together, and there were basically 4 that drove well, kept it all together, and actually competed for spots, on that podium.
Yeah, I think before we're too hard on the rookies, I mean, you touched on it. I mean, Sainz is experienced. He mentioned something about a torque surge. I don't know. Alonso mentioned something about gravel, but it's always tough,
Yeah, I mean, look, if Sainz and Alonso are having the same issues that you are, then you're not doing something so absurdly wrong. But I just think it's a little bit, I don't know. This is the biggest stage. You're here for all the marbles. You are considered, one of the top 20 drivers in the world. You've beat out so many other very talented drivers, and you're capable of this. You go off early. Oh man, that sucks. We'll get back at it next weekend. But to be like, I don't know, just kind of bawling your eyes out. Like, I don't know, grow up, man.
Yeah, I think some guys are emotional. I don't know.
No, there's no place for that. No place for that.
Ouch.
You just showed me you don't have what it takes.
I don't know. That might be a little bit too harsh. I agree. There's no crying in F1. But I don't know. That might be a little harsh.
To me, I'm like, you know what? I don't really give a shit about the crash. You're not racing for us anymore. I would be like, nope, you're gone. You're done.
Ouch. Well, let's flip that around then. Is the Kimi hype real? I mean, Toto's touted him as the next Max Verstappen. You know, he came in fourth. We said that Mercedes looked like it was going to be a good car. What did they get? Third and fourth in this race? Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there is a next Max Verstappen, but I think Kimi Antonelli's better than George Russell is. Even right now, I think he's better.
Oh, that I don't know.
So I fully expect him to outpace Russell by the end of the season. So
that would be huge, I think. I mean, because Russell's got, 6 years under his, I mean, he's been there a while. Curious. Well, no, I think we may have got Mercedes right, because we said it looked like they were fixing things. They were getting better and better. Though, in our predictions episode, I expected a bit of a drop-off on McLaren and Ferrari to sort of surpass them. Race 1 in the books, it looks like that was a bad prediction.
Yeah, I mean, based on the testing that we saw a few weeks ago, it seemed like Ferrari and McLaren were quite close. And it seems like Ferrari has a bit more of a rigid structure when it comes to their team dynamics. And I think that will serve them better than McLaren's sort of loose approach. But this weekend, there were two teams, I think, that showed that they really haven't changed at all. That was Ferrari and Haas. Ferrari's same old, same old. You know what? We'll make the worst decisions possible. And frankly, they didn't, even in the dry conditions, they didn't really look like they had the pace to match even a Williams. I mean, it was quite embarrassing for Ferrari this weekend. And I mean, I mentioned Haas, and yeah, they're going to be dismal this year. So that's unfortunate. But
another one of my terrible predictions was I thought Haas was fully focused on this year, where a lot of the mid-pack and, the bottom were going to just sort of look at 2026. Yeah, one race in, I looked like that's a bad prediction. But you called it on Williams. Williams looked good. I mean, Sainz, that was stupid. But overall, Williams looked good.
Yeah, I mean, I think this race was tough for a lot of guys. I mean, first race of the season and really tricky conditions. Sainz, ended up in a wall behind a safety car, which you never want to see. But that team certainly looks like they will, vie for those pretty decent points-paying positions. I don't expect them to be amongst the top 4 teams when all is said and done, but I really think it kind of looks like Williams, the Racing Bulls, Alpine, and Aston kind of surprised me this weekend. I think those 4 are kind of the next 4 teams that will battle it out throughout the season.
Yeah, it'd be shocking to me, but awesome if one of those teams usurped Ferrari or possibly Red Bull. And I think you're being maybe a little harsh on Ferrari, although we've got 10 years of them making bad decisions. But it was one race in. It went from wet, rainy conditions real quick to dry. So I know there's a lot of howls over their tire strategy, for example. But I don't know. I was a bit more forgiving. I was like, hey, you're in the race. These conditions are changing. You're struggling for pace. I don't know. I thought they didn't make egregious decisions.
I mean, I don't know. I think it was pretty obvious. I think when Max comes in for wet weather tires, that tells you, shit, we need wet weather tires. So just follow him into the pit. You're second and third right now. What are you doing staying out for another lap? And you fucking blow it for yourself. Now you're 7th in the championship. 7th. How fucking embarrassing is that, Ferrari?
Yeah, a lot of people felt the same, but I was like, I don't know. I given that issues with pace all weekend, changing conditions, I don't know. But I think most people probably would agree with you.
I just think 9 other teams make the right call. You fucked up.
Yeah,
right?
I guess.
That's pretty embarrassing. It's pretty embarrassing when you should be the best or second best team on the grid, and you're the only ones that fuck up.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Max going in for wet. I mean, that was another just great race. I mean, he could have been driver of the day, but just another great race by him. He had a great start. He was aggressive, but he wasn't, reckless. I don't know. My hats off to Lando, I guess. We've been really sort of tearing into Lando for sort of faltering under pressure. He did not. But he did have the best car. He started on pole. I mean, maybe it had gone 3 more laps, but, Max could have hunted him down. But I thought Lando did well. Max did well. I think even in the car, because I know we've talked about, we think it'll be Lando versus Max. One of the things that we have been talking about, at least for a year now, and sort of mitigating some of Sergio Perez's misdeeds, was that Red Bull car even worse than we all thought. Because I'd been saying all last year, this is the 4th best car. Not until the end of the year did anyone start to think, you know what, that might be true. But I happened to be watching a pre-show on F1 TV, and Julian Palmer mentioned, he sort of touched on that, like with Liam Lawson's struggles. I think he said something like, would Yuki have been better off in the Red Bull? He didn't think so. He thinks that Red Bull is just not a good car. It's just that Max is so good, probably better than we thought. So I don't know. I thought that was an interesting discussion.
Yeah, I think it's hard to say. And I think certain drivers like different setups. And, Max is obviously very capable of handling that Red Bull, which seems to challenge other drivers. That said, a lot of these new drivers or drivers on new teams haven't quite figured it out yet on their new teams or with their new cars and are not, necessarily looking like their best. And so Liam Lawson seemed to struggle this weekend in that Red Bull. And I think it does look like a challenging car, but I think Yuki probably would have as well. He's been on that Racing Bulls team for a long time. He kind of knows that setup. I think he's familiar with the balance of the car and how to set it up and, how to run a decent race. And I think he would have struggled a little bit more if he was in the Red Bull. So I think giving a lot of these drivers a few more race weekends to kind of figure it out, they probably will. And I think they'll be a lot closer to their teammates in that time. But to your point, the Red Bull has not looked like it should compete with the McLaren, even Mercedes. And I don't know how much of that is, potential sandbagging or whatever. But regardless of what car he's in, every weekend, Max shows up and delivers an impressive performance. So,
yeah. Before I get your top 5 drivers, let's do a quick fire. Is it too soon to write off Lewis?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think Lewis will easily outpace Leclerc this season.
Wow. I just cannot fathom that.
By halfway through the season, yeah, Lewis does not lose another qualifying or race to Leclerc.
Wow. Leclerc might I don't know how he could return from that. So then, too soon to write off Ferrari? They looked bad.
I think so.
They looked weak.
They looked terrible, but I think they've, looked not so good to start out the season, a few times in the last couple of years, and they've kind of righted the ship later on. So I don't know. It was weird because in the, like preseason testing, they looked quite competitive with McLaren, and those two looked sort of head and shoulders above everybody else. And to come into this weekend and really look off the pace was strange. But I have to imagine, it's Ferrari, it's Leclerc and Lewis. They should be good. I think they'll right the ship and hopefully be competitive.
All right. Give me your top 5 for the Australian Grand Prix.
Top 5. I want my driver of the day to be Max, but I am going to give it to Lando instead. Just having enough composure, knowing that he's in the better car to hold off the challenges from Max and Oscar and anybody else, and to frankly make it all the way to the end of the race. I think, any of the drivers that made it to the end of the race unscathed did a good job, but, he was the fastest. So,
yeah, I tend to agree. It seems like he has the fastest car, but, he starts on pole. It's bad conditions. Max is going to try to hunt him down. Mercedes is going to make a statement. Oscar is wanting to be the first friggin' Australian to ever win that race. And, there were just a couple minor missteps Lando made, but overall, that was a clean race. He did exactly what he had to do.
Yep, for sure. And then, I got to give Max his due. Just mentioned him, but somehow, some way, even if he looks like he's going to be totally out of it, he will put in a challenge. And that's what he did this weekend. So again, very impressive from him. Then I have Kimi Antonelli. I think he had some vehicle issues in qualifying, which meant he started from way, way back on the grid and ended up P4. I mean, I know it was chaos, but he was pretty much the only guy on track passing anybody for essentially the entire race, and kept it all together, was clean, ended up being 1-2 seconds behind his teammate. It was an impressive race from him.
Yeah, Oscar had, I thought, maybe the pass of the day, but Kimi, that was nice.
Yeah, a few times on Hulkenberg, I think. Several good overtakes from him. I think he raced well, so that was fun to see. Then I've got any number of other guys in my last two positions, but just because I thought it was an impressive weekend overall for Williams, I'm going to put Alex Albon in my top 5.
I would do that as well. I mean, so far, I think I'm right with you. Lando, Max, Kimi, Alex Albon.
And then lastly, I think you got to give it to the third driver on the podium, George Russell. Clean race. You never really saw him a whole lot in this race. He was kind of in the middle of nowhere, not really close to that front battle, but nobody was really hunting him down from behind either. Just, raced his own clean race, ended up on the podium, and it's a good start for Mercedes this season.
Yeah, and I would have Stroll and Hulkenberg. I mean, I never think of putting Stroll up there, but he did fine.
I would even put Tsunoda up there. I think he had a really, really good race, really good qualifying, and ended up on the wrong tire at the wrong time, like the two Ferraris, and just, not much you can do when you got no grip. So,
yeah, some dirty air. I started watching Drive to Survive. I mean, it's now been several years, and it's always kind of this weird disconnect if you actually follow F1 closely versus just watching the show. You're like, wait, that's out of order. That's out of order. That didn't happen. That's made up.
Yeah.
But it's really the only sort of insider view we ever get. So I definitely watch when it comes out. But I was like, I think it was the first episode. I'm a couple in. Toto Wolff was like, no, I never asked Max if he wanted to join because Lewis didn't want me to talk to him. And I can understand that. Lewis like, hey, I don't want Max on my team. But that was a bit of a revelation. That was a mini bombshell. And what must Toto be thinking now? He's an Austrian. It's not like Isaac Hadjar. He's not going to cry. Okay, he wears his emotions on his sleeve, but it's a crisp, tight sleeve. Okay, and you got the sense of betrayal. And now he's like, hey, I got Kimi. I got a faster car. F you, Lewis.
Yeah, I mean, Toto Wolff I find him quite annoying. He's constantly blaming others and complaining. And I think he has done a lot for the Mercedes team. I think he refuses now to give Lewis his credit, his due, because he feels maybe betrayed by Lewis. He's now kind of poking the bear. Lewis told me not to talk to Max.
Right.
Lewis, I wanted to. I'm so smart, blah, blah, blah. But Lewis is, too much of a princess. So blah, blah, blah. I don't know. Toto Wolff annoys me because he is quite dramatic and also only takes credit and never takes blame. And those types of people piss me off. But
all right, switching to the soft compound. I don't think the traditional F1 fan, especially the British fan, understand how much the center of gravity of F1 is moving towards America. I mean, we've talked about this from the beginning. We had more fans. We had the social media. Outside of those crypto, bro, and the expensive watches, I mean, look at all the sponsors. It's all like big American tech companies. Google, Oracle, Atlassian, Tip, I think we mentioned this a year or so ago, driving past the paddock that's being built in Las Vegas. And we're like, that's bigger than just, they're planning something there. And I saw recently they're planning on turning into a year-round attraction, lots of sims, museum, big store, just kind of a fan experience. I mean, they're wanting the premier race to be in Vegas. We've got 3 races already in America. This seems obvious. I just think the Europeans haven't figured it out yet.
I mean, I think there is a sense of like loss from the European F1 fan. And I think they're kind of realizing it and sort of grasping, right? And I get that they kind of don't want to let it go. It's their thing. And, but it's very clear, very obvious that the major new market is on this side of the Atlantic. And F1 clearly is now the biggest race on the calendar. And, I think that is frustrating and maybe scary to some. But given this and given how the sport is sort of shifting, I believe that there will soon be teams and sponsors and all that kind of stuff headquartered in the States. I don't think it stays a British operation for much longer.
Well, I mean, I generally agree with you. There's the legacy infrastructure is there, but there's just so much Saudi money. F1 is now looking to China for another team, looking at a race, I think, in Thailand. There's all the consumer money in social media and media presence in the US. This is going to pretty much almost every team based in the UK, I think, it's going to be a bit of a relic. We'll see. I did see an interesting discussion on hand jobs. So people were talking about hand jobs. And I'm like, all right, you got my attention. And then they were like, no. What we mean is people who work with their hands. And I was like, okay.
So same. I don't know.
I know. Exactly. And it was interesting because they're like, who's working with their hands that's making professional money? And it's like, like electricians and plumbers pulling down in the US 100, 150 grand a year, stuff like that. But they were like, what about some people were saying surgeons. And so because the hand job part got my attention, I was reading through the answers. And one person said, what about that guy in F1, Adrian Newey? He writes everything down in a book. And I was like, and he draws it. I was like, hey, that's actually dude just signed a contract, like an NFL quarterback contract for millions a year. And yeah, he just jots shit down in his notebook. So I thought it was an interesting discussion.
But isn't that the same? If you sit at a desk and type on a computer all day, is that not the same thing?
It might be, but it's just funny that in the stream of responses, someone said, hey, that F1 guy. And I was like, well, yeah. And he does write stuff down in a notebook. Across the line, that is our segment where we predict the top 5 for the next race. The next race is in China in a week. If we choose correctly, we get 1 point. If that person finishes exactly where we predict, we get 3 points. Patrick, what are the results from this very first race?
Well, results from this very first race are frankly disappointing. So Australia, top 5 was Norris, Verstappen, Russell, Antonelli, and then Albon, P5. So last week you predicted a top 5 of Norris, Russell, Hamilton, Sainz, and Lawson. So you get 4 total points. Oof. 3 for Lando Norris in P1, and then 1 for Russell, not in his exact finishing position. I got a total of just 1 measly point. I had Verstappen, Leclerc, Piastri, Gasly, doing. And so I just got 1 point for Verstappen.
Yeah, doing. I mean, that was a good pick because that was a sentimental pick. He's Australian, I believe, right? Yeah, and but still, those first 4, you should have got more than 1 point.
I should have, but Oscar did me wrong, and Ferrari did me wrong. So that is tough. But alas, 4-1 is the current score. quite a few races to go. So
Yep.
I think we'll probably both have better weekends ahead.
I hope so. All right, who goes first for Chinese Grand Prix?
So I have first pick this weekend.
So last year, let me just interrupt. Last year was Max Lando, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, China was an interesting race last year.
So. Last year was Max Lando. So this year, Melbourne was Lando Max. So be interesting. Okay.
So pick number 1. We'll go off script. We'll say youngest race winner in F1 history, Kimi Antonelli.
Ooh, that would be, Toto would just be clucking around like a rooster. If that
Toto would be unbearable.
He would, especially Ferrari screws Booch again. Oof, that would be awesome, though. I'd like to see that, All right. I think that's not going to happen, but Mercedes looked good, and he looked good. All right. Well, then I'm going to just right out of the box, repeat of last year, Max and Lando. I'm going to strike while the iron's hot.
Oh, boy. Let's see. Then I'm going to take Oscar, closely followed by Lewis. First podium with Ferrari.
Oh, I mean, that's going to be amazing. That's going to be special. Lewis in the red, Ferrari, podium, and especially win. But I think it's going to take a few more weeks. We'll see. All right. So I'm going to go with George, then Liam. He's going to right the ship.
Nice. Liam getting at it quick. Yeah, I think it's tough for him. I don't know. I'll have to be a little bit patient with him at Red Bull, but they tend not to be very patient. So
that second seat,
we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's weird because they pulled the trigger on so many guys in that second seat when Max has been there, but so many of them have gone on. I mean, even Danny Kvyat, he ultimately got booted out of F1, but he's still a fine racer. Ricciardo still had several years left. Gasly's still fine. Albon, look what Albon's doing. It's not going to be the end of the world. It's just they seem committed. Like Yuki's still there this year, racing bulls, and they seem committed, I think, to Isaac Hadjar, at least for the year. So I don't know if if they were to do a swap, I don't know. I mean, they might just say, hey, Liam, you're gone. You had your chance like Nick Dupree, We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. But it'd be good if you got up there. Good points for Red Bull. Let's see who all is left. I guess then I am going to come back with a vengeance, Carlos Sainz. And then P5, we'll go with Leclerc, old teammate coming in behind Sainz.
Okay, nice. This is for the Chinese Grand Prix next week. Kimi, Oscar, Lewis, Carlos Sainz, and Charles Leclerc. And that's 5 different nationalities. I've got Max, Lando, George, Liam, and I'm going to go with the Hulk, Nico Hulkenberg.
Ooh, I think Sauber is not going to be anywhere close to that. But we'll see. I mean, they've already done better than last year, which I think goes to show you how embarrassing they were last year. I mean, not on a fluke, but due to chaos, mostly. Hulkenberg got a big haul of points. And I mean, at no point did that happen last year.
Right.
Zhou, it took until the second to last race of the season for them to score any points, and that was the only thing they got.
Yeah, and I mean, I think Bottas has the Q3 record, most consecutive Q3s. I think so. I'm not going to bet on that, but I think he does. And, all those years at Mercedes, he was solid. Not great, but solid. But it was just like, I don't know. He did not look good. Zhou did not look anything special. So that was tough. Any crazy predictions, Patrick, for Chinese Grand Prix or the rest of the season?
Crazy predictions. Let's see. I guess speaking of last year's Sauber team and counter, I guess, to my across the line picks, I'm going to say that by some weird turn of events, one driver at Mercedes is going to fall ill, and a driver at Ferrari is also going to fall ill, and the reserve driver will be utilized for both of those teams. And those reserve drivers are none other than Valtteri Bottas and Zhou Guanyu. And so both of those drivers will drive next week in the Chinese Grand Prix.
Oh, that would be interesting. Wow, that would be fun. That's actually a fun prediction. Mine are a bit not fun. You said Lewis will overtake Charles, do better at Ferrari this year than Charles Leclerc. I just find it tough to believe. But I will say this. My prediction, Charles Leclerc will be the most successful driver in F1 history to never win a championship.
Successful in what way?
Most wins, most podiums, most points, however you equalize them over the years. So, yeah.
Well, that would be disappointing for Chuck.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. Oh, the handsome lad from Monaco who drives for F1 at Ferrari. Yeah, tough. My second one. So we were pretty much the first folks to ever predict there was going to be an 11th team. We said by 2026. That came to pass when people said there's no way they're going to add another team. Bam. We then said, at least I did, I think you agreed, a 12th team by 2030. I still think that's going to happen. My big crazy prediction on top of that is that at the end of this year, because there's so much stress, strife, and inner turmoil going on at Red Bull, and Christian Horner hates the fact that he's an employee, while guys like, Toto Wolff are part owners of team and turns them into a billionaire. He's going to quit Red Bull and form a group that's going to start a 12th team, and he'll be part owner.
Ooh, that would be quite interesting.
We'll see.
Yeah, I don't know who we would partner with.
Yeah.
That would be interesting to find out.
Yeah, we'll find out. Oh, and speaking of Red Bull, it's funny, I'll periodically wear a Red Bull cap. Maybe this will change if Lando wins again, and if he wins the driver championship, but nothing gets more sort of head nods and smiles from young guys than when they see my Red Bull cap. So they're all, I think, Max fans, these younger guys. So, yeah. All right. I want to thank you all for listening to everybody's most beloved father and son F1 podcast. It is much appreciated. And we are lights out.
See ya. Thanks for listening.
All right. Good show, son. Good show.
Good show.
So, I can record it. So let's hope so.
You just finished listening to Hard Compound, recorded in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and around the world.